You are tuned in to What a Baltimore Online Radio. Please note that the views and opinions expressed are of the host and not of Lady J Media. Thank you and enjoy the show.
I remember back in the day when everything was a corner away. When we dreamed and we played till the street lights came on. She told her brother to come on. Some of their friends laughed because at curfew they stayed out past. We played games like freeze tag and hide and go seek. Your grandmother was sweet, there was always something to eat. Back when we said, yo, beef squash, man, I thought that was deep. To squash a beef and see them in the street with no repercussion. What's the malfunction? Now they kill for nothing. Back in the day when the summers were long, we stayed in the streets all night long. Without a care in the world, back then you wrote a letter if you liked a girl. Hey, I like you, do you like me too? Just answer the question, yes, no, maybe so. When you had no dough, there were lawns to mow. House parties till her mother crashed it, and when she left, right back at it. There may have been static on your favorite radio station.
Welcome to the People's Power Hour, sponsored by the People's Power Assembly and the Prisoners Solidarity Committee. You can follow us on Facebook, People's Power Assembly, or sign up on the webpage at www.peoplespowerassembly.org. It's important to talk, but it's more important to act. Good evening, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A roundtable discussion tonight. First, I thought we'd talk about even a year after Breonna Taylor's death. You know, we're still having to protest, demanding justice for Breonna Taylor. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Is that you, Mr. Andre?
No, that wasn't me.
Who? Alec?
Karen, it's probably me.
Okay, go ahead.
It's probably me. I apologize. I was, I was thinking a lot about Breonna Taylor over this weekend, the 13th, this past Friday. It'll mark a year since her actual murder.
Absolutely.
And my thoughts were really wrapped around all the women, say her name, that have died at the hands of police or in prisons or in jail or the victims of racist violence. And, today, well, this month is actually Women's History Month, and March 8th was International Women's Day. So I think it's really fitting that we started with the discussion on Breonna Taylor's case.
Yes.
Of course, I know a lot of people are anxious to talk also about George Floyd. Yes. And I always shove, and I can't even get the name out, Joyce, after your wonderful poem and speech. Say I won't say that man's name.
Right. I don't want to say.
I know that people want to talk about that, but I just wanted to say her name, Breonna Taylor.
Absolutely. That's right. That's right. I want to get, so Mr. Andre, tell me what you're thinking about. It's been a year. No justice. Jail, killer, police.
Unfortunately, it's not a surprise to many of us in the activist movement here in this country, because there has been very few justice of police murders of unarmed Black and Latinx people in this country coming to trial. Breonna's case, if you just look at the murder of Breonna happened in March. Mm-hmm. We really didn't hear about it on the news media in a big way until after the death of Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, and then the people in Louisville there started to raise the call for justice for Breonna Taylor, which brought to light that absolutely horrific scene. Sometimes I sit and think about it, and I just shudder and shake inside, thinking, what was her mind going through as these bullets, 13 bullets pierced her body.
Mhm.
I mean, this was absolutely a wanton disregard for human life, and no way that can be justified by any reasonable person. They couldn't see who was behind the door, but yet they just a barrage of gunfire, and not to take away from the women that have been killed, but it brought back to mind the death of, it's been a while, so let me recall it, Amadou Diallo, and killed in New York City in the doorway of his home with 41 bullet holes in him. And this I am glad to see that they did finally drop the charges against her boyfriend, which they were trying to charge him with something because he was defending his home from what he thought were invaders.
Absolutely.
Not police. And I doubt that if they had properly identified themselves as police, I truly doubt that he would have fired a shot at them, because he would have probably gone up to the door and at least talked through the door, say, who is it and what are you? Perhaps something like that, instead of, he was defending his family, which he had a right to. And we continue to raise the call for justice. I don't know yet if there have been federal charges brought against those police officers for civil rights violations and others, but it's truly significant, and we need to keep her name alive. But not only her, but particularly in this month, Women's History Month, the name of Sandra Bland, Corinne Gaines. There are two young women named India. One that was killed she was in the some branch of the service in the car with her boyfriend, and killed down in Virginia. Right. And I can't recall her last name. And then there's another young woman named India that was also killed by police. We need to keep in mind, oh my gosh, the list is miles long of women that have been killed by police and have not received the attention that of the cases that the men have. Not to say that one side is any lesser, but there are so many women out there that have been killed by police.
A lot of trans women too. We need to recognize the transgender community.
Yes, we do.
All women, and we salute and say their name.
Okay, so Alex, do you know about Breonna's Law? Like, tell me about that. What's going on?
Oh, the push to end no-knock warrants.
Okay.
I was actually doing some research on the current status of the case.
Me too.
So the FBI is still quote unquote investigating. I'd be surprised. I'd be really surprised if there are federal charges issued against those three police officers. I think one or two of them were maybe fired from being police officers, and there were some criminal charges regarding a few bullets that went to a white family's apartment that was, I think, below or next to where Ken Walker and Breonna Taylor were living. So there were a couple of wanton endangerment parties, but nothing actually regarding Breonna Taylor's apartment.
That's right. That's right.
They spray fired over 10 rounds from a 9mm from outside the apartment and that was in addition to, it's like spray firing, just like randomly through the, and I think it's important what Andre said. Kenneth Walker had no idea who was in his house. He had no idea. And he actually did something. He had the presence of mind. He fired warning shots low.
That's right.
To try to stop whoever from advancing, and the police were just carpeting the place in ammunition, and were firing to kill anyone inside. So in terms of Breonna's Law, it's a law out of Kentucky, and it would end no-knock search warrants in the state of Kentucky. I think it's So it was passed. So it's passed in Louisville, but I think it's still working. It's still being held up in Kentucky's state legislature.
Wow.
And the idea is that it will require clear and present notification that this is the police. We're coming in to search your house instead of just
barging into,
breaking down the door. Yeah. And in many ways, the last thing I want to say, recently the movie Judas and the Black Messiah has come out and gotten a lot of recognition. And what was really interesting is, Fred Hampton, his movie was a political icon. Breonna Taylor and a leader. And Breonna Taylor was a medical worker, an EMS worker, I believe, trying to fight COVID.
yeah.
But the similarities, middle of the night, police bust in, shooting to kill, very little accountability, accusations that the people inside the house fired first and that the police were just defending themselves, when in reality, Mark Clark, I think, fired once as he was being killed, and Kenneth Walker only fired a couple of times because he didn't know who was in his house. So I just think the comparisons of how the police carry out these executions really on the Black community, it's really important that, over 50 years apart, the tactics are pretty similar, even though the cases themselves are different.
I agree with that terminology too, Alex, execution, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear from Ms. Van. Can you give us your thoughts on Breonna Taylor? A year later, we're still
a year
fighting.
later, and still fighting for her justice, that they know the wrongdoing of what really happened. We'll never get any truth out of who fired, who was wrong, and who was at fault. But what I'm glad of is that Breonna's boyfriend filed suit against those police officers. And I hope that he gets some sort of justice, from that. Because, the other, the victim that was in North Carolina, I keep forgetting his name, and he ran the opposite way, and they shot him so many times in his back. They had no problem with paying his family all those thousands of dollars that they did. Even the one in New York, the same way. They paid his family as if the money is, is going to bring him back or give them justice, because they, it's sad to say, but needless to say, that they feel like paying these families monies is everything. It doesn't mean nothing about their death. Them gone, can't bring them back. What they did is okay. It's just sad. It's just so sad. And money is not, everything to them, but they feel like, if we pay the families, we're not going to send these officers to prison. That's how I feel.
Right.
Segue. Go ahead, Michelle.
Can I say something about that? Because I know you want to segue, and I want to say a little bit about Breonna Taylor because of what Alex said. We spoke with, and I just want to send a salute out to the delegate, Attica Scott, who actually was the one and only Black woman legislator in Kentucky, who was the person who promoted this bill, who put this bill up. And she was under attack, and she was at demonstration, and they actually charged her with conspiracy to riot.
Oh my goodness.
She was charged, and also her teenage daughter. So she was under incredible scrutiny, incredible pressure. So, hats off to Delegate Attica Scott. There's not that many politicians out there with that kind of courage. And of course, the one lone only Black woman in the legislature, we need to give her a lot of credit. And I do want to say something which is a segue to what Ms. Van was saying, which is really, really true.
Right.
Tendency that they end up, and I think families do need to sue, somebody should pay, but that's not me. And they sometimes do that. They did it with Freddie Gray here. They come up with suits. And you know what is so amazing, aggravating about it? It's our money. It's our tax money that then is going to, a family, which is good that it's a family, but it's sort of like, it's like appeasement money. Like, okay, they would do anything, those millions, before they will actually
Guilt.
not just guilt, put one of their cops in jail. They sometimes will convict a cop for stealing, because they're stealing in the system. But when it comes to killing, murdering, maiming, and oppressing and everything else, and terrorizing people with Black, brown, Latino, even the poor white community, they will not do a single thing. And so, and then I'll just say one thing about Breonna. It's so frustrating for all of us that community, very few are ever going to jail. But I think we don't know the incredible movement that's come about, how many lives have been saved, how many cops have been made bigger. Not that we stop them until we can end police terror and end this police system in this country. That won't happen. But
Exactly what it is. It's
because they know that everybody in the public is outraged. It means our movement's important. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely spot on, Ms. Sharon. That's what, and it is police terror. And we need to we have to keep marching and keep protesting and keep speaking loudly about what's going on. I just think that, even a small presence, it is a presence and it will help. I really do. But what I was thinking about was, there is that Miss Van had some very good points when she talked about these civil payments. Now, okay, so I'm gonna get through this because this angers me. Okay, so Minneapolis, my friend always tells me I pronounce that wrong. Minneapolis approved a historic $27 million settlement for George Floyd's family. Now, everybody's saying, and now, Alec, I want you to speak to this. Everybody's saying that if the family takes this $27 million, he's going to walk. So I need some definite clarification. I know you can't, you can only give your opinion, but does $27 million mean that he's going to walk?
No, please. No. I think here's the thing. I think there's a chance he walks because this country is, racist and corrupt. But at the same time, maybe the popular movement is big enough now that that's what we have to continue demonstrating around this. That a jury, because I don't believe they're sequestered. Actually, they might be. But there's been so much about this problem. I would say, to answer your question, you can pay out $100 billion to a family. It doesn't affect the outcome of a criminal trial. It's civil payment. Now, Chauvin's lawyers, the officer who I know some of us aren't saying his name just for posterity's sake, that man's lawyers are stating that because of the payment, the trial should be delayed because it might tarnish the jury pool. Now, that's just garbage. They're just trying to push back any potential justice that might happen. But no, and here's the other thing, like, how, what Ms. Van said, okay, you pay $27 million. They still haven't disbanded their police force like they promised to last year. Right. They still haven't convicted this guy, and there still hasn't, been a people's investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department or the police department. So, okay, it's like in Baltimore. I believe Freddie Gray's family received a settlement. But
they absolutely did.
But the Baltimore City Police continue to terrorize people. There continue to be miscarriages of justice and conviction of innocent people like Keith Davis. So it's just the payments for one thing, but they shouldn't. They don't affect the outcome of criminal trials, and they shouldn't, because all these killer police need to be in jail.
That's exactly right. That's it. No justice, no peace. Jail. These killer police. Over and over again. It's terrible. Mr. Andre, you want to weigh in on that? Miss Van, can you mute your mic until you're ready to speak, please? I hear a lot of static. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Anybody else hear it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, I hear it. But okay, so until you're ready to speak, okay? Just until you're ready. Mr. Andre, can you weigh in on that?
And of course, I was glad to hear that the family will be compensated, and it really is such a tremendous amount, more than most have been compensated. But I compare that to statistics here in Baltimore City that show the millions of dollars that Baltimore City has had to pay out because of not only police. Jury says, oh, they were liable or negligent in some way and awarded a financial award, but also the brutality of the police in Baltimore City, where they have beat up, maimed, and disabled people and have paid out millions upon millions of dollars, a statistic, according to the statistics, to Baltimore City residents for beating and maiming someone. My crossing my fingers, hoping that people don't say, and you know, the corporate news networks are already talking about, well, do you think the jury will think that since he got 27, the family got 27 million, that that's a just compensation and won't send them to jail? I kind of side with Alex's view there, that I think I hope people are smart enough to know the difference between financial compensation and really someone committing the absolute criminal act that Derek Chauvin committed. Even if after 6 minutes he knocked off of the neck, perhaps, or 5 minutes, maybe George Floyd would still be alive today. And even if it didn't kill George Floyd, it certainly could have disabled him for life. If the blood flow to the brain is cut off, I'm not a medical person, so I'm probably out of my reach here. But if the blood flow to the brain had been cut off, as happens with a stroke, George Floyd could have been invalid for the rest of his entire life. So I think the awarding of the financials is completely appropriate, but that in no way, absolutely no way, measures up to the jailing of Derek Chauvin and the other officers, because he wasn't by himself, that kneeled, each of them weighing, I don't know, maybe 200 and some, all kneeling on his chest, so that it didn't have that ability to lungs to breathe in and out to get air. They all killed him jointly, is what I'm trying to say. And my hope is not only Derek Chauvin is convicted, but the others are convicted.
Is that guy the only one in jail, or are there other officers that are locked up also?
I think the others are also locked up, or else they're on home detention and can't leave their house. I'm not exactly certain which, but they all have to go to trial.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. And I'm going to say it again. No justice, no peace. Jail these killer.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Joyce, you're cut off.
Okay, Miss Sharon.
Oh, no, I was just saying that your mic was off for 2 seconds when you said jail, killer, police, which,
Absolutely.
I think
I'm going to keep on saying that.
Yeah, I agree. And, the other thing, too, it goes beyond just this trial, really. What people in Minneapolis and around the country have been fighting for is community control of police.
Right.
Abolish the police terror and the police system, period. I mean, that is the ultimate solution. And, it's all linked to, I don't want to get into a big discussion about it, but it's linked to white supremacy in the U.S. And they've all been unmasked by the movement of people in the streets this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to be unmasked, and we have to continue to fight.
Yes, we do. Yes,
that's what I think. And I just want to say this, because I know, my son was going to get on, but I know what he's pushing is that, and calling for, is that we have an emergency response protest as soon as this trial is finished, regardless whether it's a victory that we're celebrating or whether it's continuing to push forward for justice. And I believe the other cops have not been indicted. I could be wrong on that, but I think there was this whole question of why he was charged. Is I think Alec pointed it out, it was because some bullets went through and struck another apartment and endangered some white residents. It's a long story and it's convoluted. And really, I think it's hard sometimes, even if you get a good jury, whether you do or you don't, quote unquote, a jury of your peers. But, I think practically a jury of the peers would mean a black jury, frankly. And that won't happen. But even if the jury does convict, which is a long shot, a lot of the times the way the system is so rigged within the courts that you don't even have the conviction, like in the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore. So it's a big and broad struggle, and we just got to keep out there and continue to win community control.
You're right.
So I was reading something.
Yes.
You done, Ms. Sharon? So I was reading something that took place in Cleveland, Ohio. So they are marching for all victims that has been with corrupt cops that has been either injured, killed, or hurt in some sort. And so they were saying that we pay a shocking amount for police misconduct, and cops want us to accept it. We shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
So I didn't know, as to going into reading it, that they had a PPA there. I was so surprised about that. And so they did a march, just February the 3rd, they did a march, and they did a huge march for all victims that were murdered and killed. And so they're protesting about corrupt cops. They had pictures of them holding all the victims, Breonna, Freddie Gray, George. They did a huge march, and I'd be online and I'd be looking at a lot of corrupt cops and in different states and that nature. Yes. But a lot that is going on with these officers. What gets me the most is that it's okay. They feel like it's okay to be okay to hurt and hinder us, even if we are doing as they say, hands up, don't move, don't touch anything. Almost needless to say, when they pull, I'm even afraid when I get pulled over and my windows are so dark on my truck that I roll all the windows down and my hands on the steering wheel, and they, as they walking up to my vehicle, they have their hands on their gun, and I'm crying. And they be like, and they say, "What's the matter?" Because I'm scared, and and then
scared. Wow.
Yeah. And so I read about the young man that was in North Carolina. He has children, and the one little boy, he felt that it was that his neighbor, the young man's son, that was murdered by the cops. His son had got into an altercation with his next door neighbor, and he went and found a gun. Did you guys see that on?
Right.
So when they were talking about it, the news felt the need to dig into his dad's case that was murdered by the police officers. Why are you putting the two together to say what he did? Why?
Incident, right?
It's an effort to discredit anyone, any means that they, by any means they can, to make police look correct. They have done it time after time after time.
And you're right.
It's been
saying, Baltimore police, just as an example, Baltimore police shot and killed a man at such and such, and the second half of that news segment or the next day, we have more information on the man that was killed. He has an extensive arrest record.
Right.
Or he had, even though all charges were dropped in anything, they do it to demonize the victim.
That's right. And that's why earlier last week I put up a post and I said, stop saying that George Floyd's trial is coming up. He is the victim. He is not on trial. Don't say that. Right. I heard you say it too, Ms. Sharon. Stop doing that. He is not on trial. That is a killer's trial. And he should be held accountable. He should be made to be culpable. Like, you did this. Like, Okay, so let's talk about this, because this is really, really, like, I'm very passionate about this. Okay, so one of the perspective, he is on the jury. He is on the jury. He said that he has never, ever seen the video. How likely is that?
I heard last week they were saying he has never seen the complete video. I think they were
Okay,
trying to say
so
he saw part of it and turned away, but
okay,
he never watched the full video on the news. I
okay.
think
So I know people who weren't able to watch the full 8 minutes, but I think if he's saying he didn't watch it at all, then he should not be on that jury.
You got a point.
He should
Yeah.
not be on that jury,
A
because
lot of them does that.
yeah, but I don't believe the entire nation. I'm sorry. I'm just, maybe some people, like a lot of people, like my best friend was saying, she said, well, some people could not watch it. Now, I never watched the entire 8 minutes, but I have seen probably the first three more than 100 times.
True.
More,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Like I just, I find it very hard to believe. So what I'm getting is that he wants to, wants everybody to believe that he knows nothing about George Floyd. And like Miss Van was saying, and Mr. Andre, they want to criminalize, and demonize George Floyd. Oh, he had fentanyl in his system. Fentanyl didn't kill him. The neck writer did.
Mm-hmm.
What else are they saying? Methamphetamines.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of some discovery they're going to bring out, Alec? Is that what they're using? Do you think they're going to use that as a defense?
that's their habit. That's
Wow.
their.
Well, they said the same thing about Freddie Gray. Oh, well, we were chasing him. He only had a pocket knife, but then later turned around and said he choked off of the plastic that he had stuffed in his mouth. So again, what does that have to do with what really happened? That didn't cause the problem that you killed him.
Right. I think Alec's mic was muted.
Sorry, I think I'm good now. Yeah, I think, because here's the thing. The reality is, with most trials like this, it's going to be played out in the courtroom and out here. Like, there's no way this trial is insulated to just the courtroom. In that way, it kind of reminds me of the Scottsboro boys case, where, there were demonstrations globally, and 99 teenagers were accused falsely of raping a white woman, and there were multiple lynch mobs formed to try to execute these teenagers. And that trial played out in the courtroom and globally. And it was the public pressure that ultimately some of those teens were convicted wrongfully and then later overturned on appeal. But very few ended up serving significant jail time only because of the public outcry. And with this trial, it's going to be played out in both arenas. And I think the prosecution is going to try to use, any criminal charges Mr. Floyd had in the past, and the fact that there was some stuff in the system as a way to try to prove the officers were justified. They've been, as Andre said, they've been selling this for a long time, but I don't think we're buying. I really don't think we're buying.
Right, not at all. They've had 8 months to think about it. I'm going to read this statement, and then we're going to hear from Ms. Sharon. It says, Mr. Floyd died because of the weight of the entire Minneapolis Police Department on his neck. Now, Crump said that, the attorney said that. And so that's when, the suit was filed. So, Ms. Sharon, give us your take on the situation. What do you think about these jury, these folks that are being selected for the jury?
I was actually going to say something about Amazon or vaccines, but could I just say this? Because I to take what Ms. Van had said, and once again, shout out for justice for her husband.
Yes.
Because we're talking about police terror. Part of police terror is part of the court system, and there's so many men, women, siblings, people, from our communities that are locked up unjustly because of corrupt cops.
Absolutely.
And I think that it'd be great to hear how Mr. Green is doing. Is it okay, Joyce, if I say something about the Amazon and about the vaccines?
Absolutely. We're going to move that. Go right in. Absolutely.
And, because as far as those jurors go, I think the only thing I would add is that, we don't know how that all turned out, but really I think it's a systemic problem and not necessarily the individual question of the jurors, because a lot of times it is how the judge instructs jurors. It's how the system rigged, and without going into all the machinations of who's been charged and why, which is all corrupt and unjust. It's back to we need complete and full community control. And at some point, maybe we should devote a whole discussion on that and some of the demands that we've raised right here locally. And there's a lot of different people been fighting around different things. And also Tyrone West's case, it'd be great if we can get some of the family on at some point. But I did want to say a couple things, because I know our time's not always as long as we like.
Okay.
But 2 recent fights that we've been in. The first one is the question of Bessemer, Alabama, which is leading the way in terms of workers' rights and against union busting, against the giant trillionaire Bezos. Yes. And, literally his refusal to stop trying to union bust in Bessemer, Alabama, which is right outside of Birmingham, which is in the cradle of the civil rights movement. And those workers have been standing up against racism and have done something very courageous that's very hard for every worker to do who depends on their livelihood just to support their families. And sometimes standing up and signing a union card is the possibility you'll be fired. And since it is Women's History Month, and in commemoration also of Fannie Lou Hamer, it has been mostly Black workers in that warehouse, mostly women for that matter, Black women who have led that fight. And there is an International Day of Solidarity taking place on March the 20th.
Yes.
And that's this coming Saturday. And we will be at City Hall at 2 p.m. And from 2 p.m., we'll be marching to Whole Foods, which is owned, of course, by Amazon, which owns everything practically. So, many of us have family and friends that work there. I used to work there. My son used to work there. Rasica was with the People's Power Assembly work. There are a lot of people who work there. And so we want to have a big showing that really says Baltimore salutes the Alabama workers. We're in solidarity with them. There's demonstrations all around the world, from New York to Atlanta to California and all across the country. So if you can come out on Saturday at 2 p.m. in front of City Hall, come. If you're a community group, bring your literature. It's more than welcome. And we'll have cars too for those who can't walk the march. And give a shout out about what you're doing. And I'm looking at time, and I'm hoping that we can do a salute to Lady J's mom. I was so moved by what she posted. So because I have the mic, I want to say a little bit about the vaccination and the vaccination apartheid. And I want to talk about a small victory that was scored, even though we're continuing to put pressure, especially Leon Purnell on the east side, who runs the Men's and Family Center, and especially to Dr. Doc Marvin Cheatham, who has been working on this since the very beginning. Just recently, the big temple on Utah Street was able to eventually vaccinate people on Saturday, and 2,200 people lined up and got vaccinated. But it took protests, and I know that Dr. Cheatham got out a lot of information, and I'm off the top of my head, the woman who organized it, I don't have her name right away.
Sarah Matthews.
Sarah Matthews.
Yes.
And so we've been demanding that the homeless get vaccinated, that the city start to go to all the housing projects in Latrobe where the sewer water tested positive for COVID-19. There really needs to be a concerted effort that the city makes in demanding these vaccinations. And, we got to make sure that Hogan announced this equity, so-called equity effort. We got to make sure it's real and it's got teeth, and that they get the vaccinations out to who wants them. If you don't want vaccine, fine. But there's all this talk about vaccine hesitancy, but yet, more upper class white people have pushed themselves to the front of the line, but that's partly because of the process. So, people can go to our website and see some of what we're demanding, and just, really give Dr. Marvin Cheatham a lot of credit for his pressure, and Leon Purnell, who's Saturday at his center, he's going to be having a day-long, and not telethon, but fundraising effort. Stop by at Jefferson Street at Men's and Family Center. And I think I'll end at that. I apologize for going on and on, but there's so many activities. And I think when Miss Joyce started up with, we not only want to talk the talk, but we want to walk the walk. And I know I see Miss Lady J, and I'm hoping, on International Women's Day and on Women's Month, and salute to all of our mothers, but her mom, incredible person. I was incredibly moved by her post. And we got to remember there's also heroes that sometimes are just walk amongst us and are amongst us, including all the women on this panel today.
Yes, indeed.
So, and this wouldn't even happen without Lady J.
That's right. That's right. So, Lady J, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's do it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I had a super busy day today.
As always.
Always, yes. But I wanted to say a couple of things. I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you guys were talking about, because I love this show, and I love what you all talk about. When you were talking about like the police brutality and what's happening to our young Black men, and it's important, to talk about it, to have that discussion. And I think people don't really understand how deep it is until it happens in their family, or until somebody that it happens to. So most of my girlfriends, a lot of them have already lost their sons, so I always feel blessed every day that I still have mine. But at the same time, he's 25. So whenever he goes out the door, like he just did before you guys started your show, I'm just always like, okay, call me when you get to your destination. Call me when you get here. He's 25, and he shouldn't have to do that. But the fear that we have with our boys of, it's been times when he's gotten pulled over and he's texting me like I'm pulled over. And the fear and panic that you feel is so real. And I just hope that we get to a day where we really don't have to deal with this anymore, because too many of our Black men are being killed, murdered, And even George Floyd, it doesn't, I'm the kind of person, it doesn't matter what he did at that moment. You shouldn't have had your knee on his neck. There was no reason to put your knee on his neck. I don't care what he did. And then when he's screaming that he can't breathe and he needs some help, you don't have the right to keep your knee there. So I have a big problem with that. And I hope that they do settle it, and, that they really come to a decision, because you can give me money for taking my son's life, but that doesn't bring my son back, you know? So thank you for that conversation, because it's really powerful, and it's something that we need to keep discussing and not being afraid to talk about. So, but that's not what I'm here for. I could go on and on about that. But anyway, Miss Sharon and Miss Joyce and Miss Van, happy Women's Month. I'm so glad you ladies came into my life. And people come into your life for reasons and seasons, and I met, it's crazy because Miss Sharon, you remember how we met, right? I was actually covering a rally downtown, and it was for the young man who wasn't able to go into Uzo Bay restaurant. And so I see this white lady there, right? And in the midst of all of these Black people, and I'm like, who is this woman? And she had her bullhorn, and she was just in the crowd, and she got up and she talked. And so, me, I had to go over there and find out who she was. And I went over and introduced myself, and we started talking. I'm like, she's so sweet. I'm thinking she's this nice, sweet, older woman. This woman is tough, y'all. She is tough as
Yeah.
Yes.
She is tough
I
as nails. And so I'm so glad I met her. And then I was introduced to Van, and Van
Yeah.
introduced me to Miss Joy. So
Yeah.
I just love you ladies. And
We love you too.
yes. And so it's just been an incredible ride. So thank you so much. And I know I'm supposed to use this time to talk about my mom. And so I think everybody knows that my mom is sick, and my sisters and I have three sisters, and we help my dad to care for her. So we have our routine of, who goes when. So everybody knows at the station that I'm there from Friday to Monday, and I'm just, focused on her. And I was on a show last night, and the lady was asking me, how did you come to the decision to just take care of your mom and do your business and do your other stuff that you want to do? And I was just like, there was no decision,
Right.
that's
Right.
my mom. And, everything else waits because you only get one mother. And so my mom, like I said on the show last night, it's four of us. She stayed home with us. She cooked for us. She made our clothes. She shopped for us. She always had us looking good. And, in turn, when I had my son, when my sister had her children, we didn't do daycare. We stayed home, took the L, like, we'll pay the bills later. We stayed home for our kids, so they don't know anything about. My son knows nothing about daycare, babysitter, or anything. And I just learned so much from my mom. And I was telling Lisa last night that the one thing I really loved about my mom is that I've never seen her just walk around the house looking bad. Like, never seen her walking with a bathrobe, nightgown, hair undone. She didn't work, but every day you would think she was going to work. She was dressed, hair done, makeup done, and smelling good. You could smell her before she gets down the steps. And she came in the kitchen, she cooked, she did all of that. And she just really taught us that you don't take care of yourself for other people. You take care of yourself for you. And so I said last night, I will walk around, do my hair, makeup, and ain't nobody here but me. That's just what I got from her, that you always, she said, look your best. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to come in contact with. And it's just so many things that I learned from her. So in turn, it's not really a duty or a job to go over and take care of my mom. It's like, that's my pleasure. That's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
And, I actually enjoy it because I spent so many years of my life working like a dog, and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my family because I went from being married to being a single mom, and I was working 3 jobs. So I didn't get to do a lot with them. So to be able to take care of her now, and like I said, she can have whatever she wants, that it's, I don't even think about it. I don't think about it. I just know on Fridays I need to pack my suitcase and go to my mom's house. And that's what we do. My sisters, we don't think about it. We just do it. And I think as children, that's a duty. That's what the Bible talks about, that you honor your father and your mother so your days can be long. And like I said, I'm the oldest one, so it's my duty to do whatever I can do. And what I will say is nothing on my end has fallen apart. I'm still being blessed and everything, but I've put my mother first before the business, before everything. She comes first. And even on my birthday, when I was in New York, I was on the phone, making sure she was okay, because normally I'm there on the weekend. So, I do salute her and give a shout out to her. She's 82, and she's been a really good mother. And her and my dad have just celebrated their 60th anniversary
Wow.
in December, on December 3rd. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And you know what? I'm just finding out after all these years that they only knew each other 3 months, and then they got married. And I was like, wow.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, I was like, well, maybe there's hope,
60 years. It wasn't easy.
I know. And you know what? It's 60 years of, you have to work. You got to put the work in. But I think when the two people care enough to put the work in, That's what makes the difference. And so, I just have to say, like, I've had a really good life with my parents growing up. And, I feel like they gave us all that they could give us. And for everything that we did, they were always there, even when we were adults. If we invited them to something, like, they just made their way there. So I don't really know anything else, I just don't, because this is the way that we grew up. So it's just natural for me in turn to go and do whatever I can for my mom.
I want to say this real quick. When you say that, my grandmother is about to be 89 Wednesday, and she has a bruise on her back. And I say, Grandma, what is that? I never asked her because I was afraid to. And she told me just recently, we do FaceTime all the time because she's down North Carolina. And she said that bruise came from, I was tortured in slavery. I never asked her because it's a nasty scar. And it scarred her to the point where this shoulder is higher than this one because they had to do surgery. And I always wanted to ask her. And I just, almost 50, I just literally just asked her that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a lot of things that, that generation, because it was so hard and so difficult, that they don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to really understand, like, respect people. If they don't want to talk about it, they don't have to. But me, I went down and I just did my own research. I went to Richmond and, I just did my own research on my family because there was a lot of things that I didn't know. And I went down there and I was able to go to the plantation where my great-great-grandmother worked. I was able to go to the site where they dumped her body with all of the other slaves because back then they didn't, give them their own grave. And so I went there and I went to the church that she used to go under the bridge and walk in the water to so she could get there so nobody would see her. And so, I actually... It was nice. And it was just things that I didn't understand. Like, my skin tone is dark and, but I have cousins who look like Miss Sharon, and so growing up, I never understood why. My mother's probably watching this and she probably does not remember this, but we were at a funeral and one of my relatives had passed away. And I remember being in the funeral and like all of the really light people that look white in my family, they were sitting on one side. And it was like all of us dark people, we were on the other side. So I'm a kid and I'm like, Mom, what? And I was trying to ask her, like, they're related to us. And she's like, yeah, like, be quiet. And I was like, well, why they look white? And we look like this? And it was like, right. In church.
Yeah.
So, but so it was always a question, like, why do my relatives look white? And they got the hair and all of that. So, but what I found out is that my great-great-grandmother was raped several times by the slave master. And so the children, and she was also married at the same time. So the children that she had by him, as you go down through generations there, they all look biracial. And then her children, like my grandmother, my mother's mother, they're dark skinned.
Right.
And so you see it, in the family. And it was really interesting when I went down there, and I don't really know her, but it was like I was there and I could feel her spirit while I was down there. And just like the pain of can you imagine being married to your husband and they pull you out of bed? This man is pulling you out of bed to have sex with him. You have sex with him, you got to come back to your husband. And, he's raped you and there's nothing that your husband can do, So I just think about all the pain that she must have gone through. And then also learning that when she had these children, it wasn't like you get maternity leave or you get to lay back. She had to strap the children on her back right after labor and go work in the field all day. So, she went through a lot of torture. She went through a lot of pain, but I feel like it gave all of her grandchildren and her children a lot of strength, to go after what we want and to be strong women. And because of her and because of my mom and what my dad put in me, I don't take any mess from anybody. like it's a wrap. I'm not taking no mess, and I just, it's just sad, to think about what they went through back then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lady J, we certainly salute you. I want to salute you personally. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm sure everybody else wants to just give you a shout out before we wrap this up. Absolutely. Go
I
ahead, Miss
salute
Sharon.
you. I salute
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
So
Thank
the
you so much.
salute.
And ladies, we have an event coming up the end of the month.
Yeah.
And Miss Sharon doesn't know this, so I'll just go ahead and tell her now that it's
Oh,
going to be a Women's Warrior event. And so Miss Sharon is one of the women that I'm going to be saluting at the
yeah.
Women's Warrior event the last Sunday of this month.
Well,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be her and also Christina Flowers. So we're going to salute women warriors, women who are really out there, giving back to the community, and they don't have to, but they're out there all the time. So that's going to be on the 29th, and we're going to have lunch and everything. It's going to be fun.
Yep. The last Sunday in the month. Yep.
Right.
And Miss Van, you're invited. So
Oh, she already knows she's coming.
yeah.
Y'all about to make me cry. I gotta get off here. Y'all know I'm a cry, baby. I'm trying to hold up like this so I won't cry. Lord
Oh
have
my
mercy.
goodness. Yeah.
So it was
But thank you
very,
all so
very,
much.
you're
Thank you.
welcome.
thank you. Thank you.
That's a
Thank
rich
you.
legacy, Lady J. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Absolutely.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good
Not a-
night. Good night.
Oh.